There we go. Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, that's really good. If you guys have more questions, just keep asking them in your teams and in the chat, or DM me as well. Looking at my outline here. Okay, so yeah, we didn't finish the course outline. We're going to loop back at that at the end potentially, or leave that for an exercise. So let's go ahead and get into CSS because there is a lot to cover. So I'm sure you guys saw the HTML is very basic. It is not very pretty. And so CSS is what's going to do all of that for you. And the CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And the reason it has that name is because of the way it applies, and it applies in kind of a cascading manner. So I will explain that more as we discuss it. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and create, or go into my folder here. And I do day 3. I probably should have just titled these like the topic, but that's okay. We're just going to do day 3, and then I'm going to open that in Visual Studio Code. So I think it's best if you guys can follow along with the code as I'm coding, type it up yourself. At least try. But if that just seems like overwhelming, at least try to code it, at a separate time, because I know sometimes it might think that you see it and, you're learning and you're like, oh, wow, that's how you do it. But for some reason, it's always different when you actually type it out yourself. So that's what I would recommend. So let's create another file in here. And okay, so let's set up our document like usual. All right. And let's get our live server going. I'll leave that here. Okay. Okay, so let's make a header. So we've got just a header element here. H1, let's learn CSS, and I save my document. So it's showing up over here on the live server. So very basic. So the CSS is going to add to that. So there's 3 different ways that you can add CSS to your document. The first one is as an attribute. So you can type in style as an attribute, and then we're just going to do color. Color changes the font, and let's do pink. So you got your open quotes here, style open quotes, and then you have to have this here. And then the value for it. Really should have a semicolon, but you don't necessarily need it with one. So now you can see we have changed the color here, but we can also, actually, I'm going to move this to the body. Okay. We also have something called a style tag. And in the style tag here, so I'm going to comment out this header here. And I think I talked to you guys about HTML comments, right? So command / should auto comment this out, or you should be able to. You can also type this in. It's got the closing one too. Okay, so let's comment that out and do another one. We'll just do the same one. Okay. Let's learn CSS. So we can go up to our style here and we can do H1. This is a H1 element. And we can do color blue. So now you can see we have the blue. So there's 3 ways. These are 2 ways. And then the third way is what you're going to want to do is create a folder and call this folder CSS. And in there, we will just type style.css. And you have to do the .css because now our text editor here knows this is a CSS document. And so we can actually, the same, anything that you would put inside a style tag is the same thing that's going to go in your document. So we can just like copy this here. Color blue. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to select this and just comment it all out. That way you see that we only, oh, we haven't linked it yet. My bad. Okay. It's black here and we have it here, but we have to now connect that HTML document to the CSS document. Otherwise, as you can see here, it has no ID at all. So I like to put those in the head here. Usually I like to put a little comment just to say style sheets. And then we're going to do a link. And that has an attribute called REL, which stands for relation. It wants to know what's the relationship of why you have this. So style sheet is a specific keyword, letting the browser know that this is adding styling. And then you need the href because that's going to give us our file path. I'm going to open this a bit more. I'm going to close the tab. Okay. So for the file path, we are in index.html document right now. So you can see we have the folder day 3, and then in day 3, you have a folder CSS, and then you have this index.html that we are at. So this CSS folder and this index.html are in the same level. I guess you could say siblings, if that's what you want to call it. So we just need to get into the CSS file. In order to do that, we just type CSS because it's in the same level. And then you can see it's already auto-populated. Or you can just type it out, type out the name of here. And once you're like building full websites, you're probably going to have like lots of different style sheets. So one of the reasons we have style sheets is because HTML, as I'm sure you guys saw, can already start getting really messy really fast. And so imagine if you have, when you start adding CSS, like it's a lot, like it's a lot. And so imagine having all of the CSS and all of the HTML in one document like this. It's way too much and it's confusing. So even though I'm showing you that you can do this, this is not a standard practice or something good you should do. And even adding it here, where we added the style attribute, neither of those are, you shouldn't do either of those. You should always keep it in a style sheet. And it's just a way to keep it organized and easy to read. You know, if you have different sections too of a web page, you might have a style sheet for each one. So you might have like a header.css and navigation.css and services list.css or whatever you can imagine. You can easily kind of divide those into multiple ones. You can add as many as you want. Yeah, you can add as many as you want. So, but those are 3 ways that you can add it. I'm actually gonna comment that out again. I'm gonna comment out the style tag. So now it should work. Yeah, so you can see we don't have any styling because this is all commented out. So we just have this header, let's learn CSS, but we've linked this style sheet. So we go to style.css, header 1, it should be blue. And that's what we got. I will say though, you know, sometimes when you're coding and you want to troubleshoot and you like need to see something, you might like add something in real quick here for whatever reason, but you just shouldn't keep it there. Yeah, okay. So those are the 3 ways that we added them. So CSS is always just going to be a list of commands here. You have like the attribute and the value and a semicolon, and you can just put more and more. So to create a div here, and I'm going to give it a class name box. I'm going to go ahead and close the slide here. Okay, so a class name box. So we don't have anything like inside here, so you can't see anything. Now you can, but I'm going to delete that. We don't want that there. But we gave it a class name box, but we need to apply styling. So let's go to our CSS. And we're going to do dot box because you use a dot to specify that it's a class. And after we do this, I'll show you what these are. These are called selectors. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you can see up here, we don't have a dot because it's just going over the element. So it would apply to any H1 element. So, you know, like I showed you here, we have this div. Div is obviously not an H1, so it doesn't have the blue applied. But if we added another H1 document, it's also going to be blue. And that's because that's an element selector. But the dot specifically goes to class. All right, so let's do something here. I'm going to go back and delete this div. I don't want that. Okay. So we're going to do width. Let's do 200 pixels. Let's do height, 200 pixels. I want to make it a box, like I said. Let's do a background color. And let's make it gray. You can see all these colors pop up too, which is really nice. And there's a lot more to colors too that we'll talk about later in the week, because you can easily do these, drop down colors, but there's like a lot of ways to do custom colors. So that's a whole thing. But for now, I'm just going to type gray. It's already there for us. And let's see what that looks like. Let's save the document. Okay, so now we actually have a box. It has a height, it has a width, it has a color. We can even give it a border. We're going to do solid. There's a lot of different kinds of borders too. You'd have to look it up. There's solid ones, dotted ones. But the main thing I'm trying to show you here is that this is how you apply CSS. You're just going to have as many commands as you want of attributes and values. So how do you learn which attributes there are? You're gonna get really familiar with the documentation. So if you just Google CSS documentation, you can go to this one. This top one is really good. This W3 schools is really good too. And that's not. Where's the chat? There it is. Okay. There you go. There is the link in the chat if you guys want to look. Okay. So yeah, where it references CSS. They also have really great tutorials here that you can even go deeper into CSS that are really good. But it's also just a reference. So let's see here. So properties. You can see over here, properties. Where's it going to take me? There it is. Okay. I don't know where we're at, but if you go to reference here and then you just click CSS reference, it's exhaustive reference. So here, if we scroll down a little bit, you can see here's the index. So there is a lot of them, as you can see. So if you're like, I want to do this, what's the command? You can look through here, like, okay, cursor, I want to change what my cursor looks like. You can click on cursor and they'll have these like examples here of what you want it to look like. Like you see, we have this little like loading one, this question mark, all different ones. So this is just an example, and they'll even have code. And so I'm going kind of fast through this because we're not actually reading it. I just want to show you, there's a lot of information here to learn about that specific thing that you're trying to do. And you'll also probably just end up Googling, like, how can I do this thing? And then someone's going to point you in the right direction of a property and you can kind of explore it. So let's see. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there for now, but you'll definitely, it's really good to become familiar with the documentation and know how to leverage it to your advantage, because it's going to tell you exactly how things work. Yeah, specifically. So okay, so now that we showed you that, let's talk about selectors a little bit. So we have elements. To apply CSS, you can apply it to an element. You can apply it to a class. You can apply it to something that's called an ID. Call this one ID name. It's this pound symbol. Okay, so let's make another one here. Okay, and then it's just the attribute called ID. And I already forgot what we called it. Okay, ID name. ID underscore name. Okay. So it's got the ID, but we didn't apply anything yet. So let's go back. Okay, color red. So now we have selected the ID. I'm going to pop up the reference here. So there's also a reference for, so that's the index, that's all of the attributes that you have, the elements, and then you have selectors. So there's a star, which we're going to show later how that works. When we change some things, it changes everything. So like everything in your document, it'll apply it. We have the element selector, which I already told you, the class selector, the ID selector, and then attribute selector. So you can just do any attribute and a value. So let's just like add. So I'm going to give it an attribute name, also called, I'm going to do box 1, just to not, it's confusing to have the same name. So, and if we look here, it's probably kind of hard to read this. But. Oh, I'm gonna not add that to the div. Add it here. I'm just gonna make a new element. Okay, so I gave it name box 1, and now you can see it's purple. So those are the main selectors, and then we had the universal one as well. Which I will show you more about that later. So there's also ways to combine elements. So that's a whole thing too, which is also in the documentation. Grouping. So you can just make a list, which I'm going to show you. You can also get like children elements. There's a lot of different specific things you can get. We don't have time to do examples of all of them in class, but they are there just so you know. But I will show you how we can add on. So I'm gonna go back here. This header 1, let's learn CSS. Let's add a paragraph underneath that. And we'll say day 3 of module 1. Okay. So now we have this paragraph. I'm gonna get rid of this. Okay. So if I go up here and I do H1, comma, P, because I want all header 1 elements in all paragraphs to be blue, I can just use a comma. And likewise, you could just keep like adding as many as you want. Okay. So you can see up here that we wanted all header 1s, header 2, header 3, and header 4 to be blue. But we have this ID selector, and ID selector, ID selector here is at H2. Well, we said we wanted it to be blue right here, H2, blue. Why is it red? Well, that is because down here, it's red. So that's called a conflict. And how those are resolved, how the conflicts are resolved is why CSS is called cascading style sheets. So there's actually 2 reasons why this one is red and not blue. One is because it came after. So if I just comment that out, you know, it's blue, it came after. So if I did like a header 2 up here, I'll just do it down here. If I do a header 2 here and do color purple, because it came after, it's going to be purple. And then if I move this above, it's going to be blue now because of how it cascades down. But if I uncomment this ID name now, it's red. But if I'm going to copy it and paste it, but if I move ID up here, it should be blue, right? It's not. It's not blue. Why is it not blue? I just told you that it matters what order it is. Well, because in addition to order, there is a, I guess, a weight, if that's what you want to call it. So IDs are the, comment this, IDs are the highest priority. So they are going to override anything else. And then classes come next, and then elements. So it might take a while to get familiar with how things are applying. There's definitely going to be a day when you have applied a lot of CSS and you are like, it is not doing what I thought it was going to do. And you need to come back and think you probably have a conflict somewhere that needs fixed. And so you'll need to apply these rules and become the investigator. So that's how it works in here, because also, okay. Now this header 1 is aqua, but in style, it's supposed to be blue. So it's the same thing, even though you're probably never going to do this. It's good to know that it also applies if you have applied CSS in multiple places and multiple sheets, it's going to apply, right? So like if you have another, we'll do that in a second, but this blue, so like as this document loaded, this link came first. So it came, it applied, it was blue. But then it comes down later and it gets overwritten. So now it's aqua. And then, just to show you again, if we were gonna add this here, okay, aquamarine. Now it's aquamarine. For the exact same reason, it's applying and getting overwritten in each one of these places. And so same thing, if I add another sheet, so I'm going to just copy this here, create another style sheet, but link it to style 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these other style tags again to show you. So it should be blue, right? Because we only have one style, and that's here, H1 blue. But now we've added a second style sheet, and yes, it does come after. So what do you think is going to happen here if we do H1? So now you can't see it because it's white. So that is the meaning of cascading. And I guess we can leave that for now, but I'm going to close it because we're just going to use style for right now. And I'm going to delete that because I don't want it there. Okay. Great. Okay. Let's see. And just to show you one more example, in this attribute selector, or here in this H2, this ID name, I'm going to also give it a class name. And I will just call it class name since it says ID name. Okay, so we have ID name and then class name. And using the dot again because it's a class. So then color pink. So same thing that I've been saying when I talk to you about these elements of highest priority. Because IDs have the highest priority, again, it's not going to change. The other thing to know is that we can stack classes. So let's put a font size here and let's make it, I don't know, let's see what 50 pixels looks like. Okay. So now we've stacked, right? It's got styling from ID, that's red, and it's got styling from class, that's 50 pixels. And we could even add more classes. Let's do class 2. Let's see. So So let's make it center. So we can actually come here and in class name, do space and then do class 2. So any single element you have, you can also apply as many classes as you want. So it's additive, it's cumulative, it's infinite, I guess you can say. All right. Cool. Let's get into the CSS box model, which is super important to understanding how CSS works. So one of the reasons I wanted you guys to download Chrome is because of its developer inspecting tools. So if you're in Chrome, you should be able to right click and go to inspect. And you can see in inspect here. I hope it's not too small. It's probably pretty small, but you can see on your own computer. You have everything we typed out. We have our entire HTML document here that we can see from the browser. And so this is actually really cool because you guys can start going to just whatever websites you're on and like doing inspecting, and you can like see their code. So that's kind of cool. So there's a lot here in learning to use these, but we have the ability to see the styles and things that are on. So I want to talk about this box. Since we're talking about the box model, this is kind of the easiest visual to see, and that was our class box here. And if you look down here, you can see we have a width of 200, a height of 200. So now it's got all of our CSS down here as well. But this part down here is what's called the box model. Okay. So width is 200, height is 200. And you can see our boxes here. But we've also got a border that's 2. And then you also have margin and padding. So let's see how that looks. Oh wait, my code's over here. Okay. So this is class box. So let's go over to the box. Okay, so I changed the border width to 2 pixels. We didn't have any border width prior, and so it's 2 by default. But now we can see here that it has increased to 10. You can easily see this. But we also have something called padding. Let's do 20 pixels. Let me close this real quick. And get rid of this padding. Okay, you see how it's smaller here? And then as soon as we add this padding, it gets bigger. So got to select the box here. Okay, so you can see we have padding 20. And so as I hover this, you can see how it's hovered here in the center if you look. So it's 200 by 200, and then we've got this 20 pixels, And then we've got the border. So the padding is what separates like within the box. So if the outside of the box is the border, you have the content, which is the center, and then the padding, you know, to spread it out. And you can think of that because imagine if we had text in this box, would you necessarily want text going from this very corner all the way over here? Like it wouldn't look very good, would it? So that's one of the reasons why you'll add padding. So it's like nice and kind of centered within. But then you've also got margin. So margin is what's going to separate it from like this paragraph up here or this down here. So if we do margin and we do 30 pixels, I'm going to move this so you can see as it changes. Okay, 30 pixels. Now it's moved. I'm going to comment it out. Okay, so it's there. And now it's going to move 30 pixels. Okay. If we just put margin, it's going to move top, bottom, right, and left in every direction. But we could also, if I comment this out, we could just do margin top. And then this is going to be exactly what you think it is. That margin is only going to apply to the top. Let's do a bigger one so you can see it here. Okay, so, you know, it didn't apply down here, but maybe we want it on the bottom too. Okay, so you have the margin. Also super useful when, I mean, you're probably not going to have a margin that big. Oops. But there's lots of situations where you're going to want to put space between your elements. So those are the elements of what is called the box model. But what is interesting about this is, okay, you see how this isn't our box, it's highlighting this. So we need to select, I don't think we can select it there. We have to go in our HTML here and select our box. Okay. So we put over here the height and width as 200 pixels. But as you can see, the 200 pixels is just right here. It's actually taking up 200 plus 20 plus 10 total. So 230 pixels by 230 pixels, because you can see it goes all the way around. And so it's kind of up to you. There's like two kind of schools of thought about how you want to do it. You're welcome to leave it like that, but I personally think it can make some confusing behavior sometimes because you're like, I only allocated this much space and it's obviously taking up more. So you can actually change the setting through CSS to like wrap the height and width when you set it to be inclusive of border padding and the content. So like I showed you here, we set it to 200, but it's actually taking 230. So let me show you what I mean. So if we go to box sizing and do border box. Okay, so our padding and our border stayed the same, but our content now has decreased to 140. So what? Well, it should equal 200, so I'm a little confused. that doing that? Okay, well, I'm not like 100% sure right now why that is doing that, but you can see that it changed, right? Because if we take off this box sizing, it's going to go back to 200 in the middle. So that's the only change we made. You change it to box sizing, and now it's including this together. So you're going to get, you should get a lot more behavior that you would expect.
And it's 200 including the border, right?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So once we start kind of building a web page, this is my personal preference. We'll actually apply the selector that applies to everything. And we'll do so let's remove this here. Yeah, and it stays the same. Okay. It's really bothering me. I'm going to figure that out.
Doesn't it calculate all around, like 140 plus 20 plus 10 plus 20 plus 10?
Oh my God. Yes. Thank you. Having a moment. I'm like, this is driving me crazy. Why is it not working? Yes. Yes. That's exactly what it is. 10, 20, 40. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. This is why it helps to work with your teammates, because sometimes you cannot see what is right in front of you. Okay. Well, it is 6:28. So let's see here. Did padding, margin, and border. Yeah, that's a good place to stop right there with the box model. So let's see. So Saturday, we're going to get into positioning and display, talking a little bit more about how to change elements from block to inline, as well as like different kind of positionings. Like, for example, in this box, we have add a header. We have text here. So maybe we want to move this text up here, or we want to move this text down here. That's a whole dark art of positioning. So we are going to be getting into that. And then I'm also going to show you some awesome resources for colors and images, different like fonts that you can add in, how to add fonts. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about centering, and then do some advanced CSS. So yeah, that's about it. Does anybody have any questions? I'll upload this code as well. Yeah, Philip?
I have a question. I think you said we were going to go back to is it the styling that overrides everything else, or?
Oh, this
okay.
one?
Okay, yes, that's the one I was looking for. I got lost over there. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, it's a lot. I'll also upload this code as well. I wish I could see all these. There we go. Okay. All right, guys. Well, let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you on Saturday and we'll release some more challenges on Saturday. And just again, want to emphasize, we want to try to go at a pace that's good for you guys. So at any time, if you guys are like, this is too fast or slow down, like, please be willing to give us feedback. We want you guys to get the most out of this as possible. So. All right. Well, have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, Anna.
You.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.